Hmm. Oh.
All right, time given, we'll try to get to this as quick as possible. But in summation of, in summarizing what we went through, or went over last class or the previous classes in general, right? We spoke about the difference between Voodoo and the different sister or daughter religions, which is Congo Blaze, Santeria, Hoodoo, etc. We spoke about the differences between them. We spoke about the history, the civil wars that took place, and the wars in general that took place between them. We talked about the laws and the energy behind them, the different definitions and verbiage and language that you can find. And I wanted to, once again, I know I explained in different classes, is that I wanted to take time to go over everything that I've mentioned to you guys, so you guys will understand why it's important, of course, to preserve this information and preserve this knowledge, to be more enthused about being a practitioner, whether it's taking the disclaimers serious, as far as using magic, potions, tinctures, tonics, anything that you consume, anything that you ingest, as far as the disclaimer, as far as anything that you do consume or ingest or any herbs that I do speak to you about, I do want to put the disclaimer in there is if it's you're going to as far as medicinal effects, human anatomy effects, as far as you're trying to so-called quote-unquote heal or cure yourself, I label it as assisting the different complications or conditions that you could have. But if you are going to the medicinal effects of these herbs or botanicals, to always consult a doctor if you're not an expert or you haven't been studying or researching these botanicals for yourself thoroughly. Um, and that goes for the magic as well, right? Because we need to be careful. So we spoke about all these different things, and I want to speak about them in entirety, just to be serious about everything. So we talked about the different commercial magic, the different commercial energy, right? So we spoke about the different five sectors of witches or witchcraft or magic, whether it was cosmic, whether it was Asian, whether it was green magic, whether it was kitchen magic, etc. Now, I want to uh, explain how important the difference between all of this is. And up here we have um, the different 10 bodies. And I will explain this and why it's important. This is only a small fragment of our conversation today. But these are the 10 bodies. Now, I've mentioned this in other classes, that the body is very important. It's the temple, it's the vehicle, it's the vehicle for different laws when they come here. Their vehicles. They get time to live a life on Earth once again. They get to experience different things on Earth. So it's important to keep your body intact, correct? And I explained this, or I elaborated or elucidated on this very shortly or momentarily. And I didn't get time to speak about this in the last two classes, but it was on the curriculum. And we will explain more about it as we go on. Like I said, it's only a small fragment of the things that I want to speak about today, though. So we spoke about the grandmother plants. We spoke about the mother plants, correct? We spoke about the mother plants being the plants that you find in your kitchen, your cupboard, very easily to get. These was the dill, these was the sage, these was the basils, these was the ones that you cook with. This goes towards kitchen magic and kitchen witchcraft and different things as well, right? Being collaborative with the green magic. Now, when we spoke about the mother plants, I had many different reasons why I named them the mother plants because they're easier to find, correct? We spoke about the grandmother plants. These was the plants that was going to be a little bit more harder to get to. You had to travel to get to. You had to have a little bit more wisdom when dealing with them, a little bit more experience when dealing with them. That's why they were titled the grandmother plants compared to the important mother plants, but these were the first stages as far as culinary. And we spoke about these two being very important as far as cultivating magic or plant magic or green magic. Now the next plants that I will speak about, and I will speak about maybe 8 today. We are speaking about auntie plants today. These are the auntie plants. These are the aunt plants. These plants are the ones that is in the middle of the mother plants and grandmother plants. They have a large amount of power. They are sought after tool on many different levels. They have ancient definitions. They have ancient uh, hieroglyphics, different texts on walls about them. But these ones also aren't as hard to find as well, correct? Very powerful, but not hard to find. And if you think about as far as the collaboration between the mother, the grandmother, the auntie, these are the ones that's going to the auntie that's going to buy you a shirt on 4th of July just to make sure you look good, right? These are the ones that's at your access more frequently, but have the power to actually change things more faster compared to the culinary, the kitchen, or the basic green plants or the green magic plants that we have. So, like I said, we're going to talk about 8 of them, and we'll have them scattered out through here, and I will let you know when we're speaking about them. But I also spoke about, in the beginning of this, is foraging, correct? And I spoke about building a relationship with these plants. I spoke about foraging because anytime you see a shaman, anytime you see a guru, anytime you see a monk, and they go searching for an answer, they go to ceremonies, they go to rituals, where they go to the forest, the jungle. So we have to understand that ecosystem, that environment is a naturalistic, almost an atmospheric veil that we can tap into. These so-called groves of trees, as they used to say in different metaphysical tales and different things like that, correct? So foraging is very important because that's going to get you out there in that atmosphere. That's going to get you out there in that environment. And this is where the first stage of building communication with plants, building a relationship with plants come in. And when I speak about this, I'm speaking about appearance, I'm speaking about name, I'm speaking about color. It goes towards names and different things like that because you will run into the botanical Mangifera indica. They're speaking about mangoes here. Mangifera indica is the botanical name for mangoes. There's over 50 different species of mangoes. Mangoes is part of the cashew family. They say that mangoes have very, enormous amount of benefits as far as the eyes, as far as the brain. And if you know about cannabis, which we will speak about in a minute here, you have sativa and you have indica. It's part of the same genus family as the Hindu Kush, as we speak about as well. And they believe that if you eat mangoes with cannabis, that it would enhance the so-called psychoactive effects of cannabis. So these two was always collaborated with, but they used the term of Mangifera indica, so people didn't know until more recent times. But this is the importance of having a relationship with the mango tree to know that the botanical name of it is Mangifera indica, then more information will be at your access. So this is the importance of having a relationship and what I mean by having a relationship with plants. And like I say, it goes towards appearances as far as understanding that milk thistle will be around pokeberry. Pokeberry is a poisonous berry, keeping different rodents and pests and humans away from taking too much of the milk thistle. And this goes back to the foraging and having an intelligence and relationship with these plants. Understanding that we're not going, unless you are running an herb business or mass producing this on your own, cultivating and farming these herbs on your own. When you find them in the wild, you're not supposed to take all of them. You're supposed to leave at least 65% of the plant so it could be there the following year. You're only supposed to take as much as what they say your palm can hold, and use that for your potions, use that for your remedies, use that for your tinctures, etc. So that's the intelligence of having a relationship, the appearance of knowing the appearance of it, knowing that plants is going to be have other relationships with plants to keep you at bay or to keep you in line or in balance or in equilibrium of nature. And as far as color, correct? When we're dealing with bluish, purplish hue plants, we're talking about echinacea, blue lotus, blueberries. When we are dealing with these plants are telling you that they are good for anti-asthma, anti-spasmodic, as you will find the medical term, correct? They're good for calming. They're good for inflammation. Red plants are, we're talking about strawberries, we're talking about cherries, even roses. These plants are good for temperature balancing, equilibriums. These are good for blood nourishing, blood controls. When you talk about green, we're talking about replenishing, rejuvenating, focus, balancing the body. These are usually leafy greens, spinach, mint, etc. When you find black plants, these are purgative plants. These are laxative plants. These are plants for detoxification. And as far as metaphysics, these are ones that are perfect for banishing and different things like that. So this is the importance of building a relationship with these plants and knowing these plants, having a complete understanding of the science of these plants, correct? Because when we deal with this in time, in history, all the way to modern days, this is the science of life. They talk about the tree of life, and then they talk about secret sciences. And what they're talking about is ologies, biology, sociology, psychology. These are different branches. When you look up ology, O-L-O-G-Y, when you look up that in the not only the Greek lexicon but also Latin times as well, ology stands for branch or log. And what they were trying to tell you is that it's branches of the key to success of life, and you will not have a full understanding unless you study psychology, unless you study astrology, unless you study biology and different things like that. So these is the importance of understanding nature. And then I bring up today is going to be an understanding of trees, okay? Because I have many different breakdowns of how precious trees are, and that we probably all need to be trees in the next life. But so that's the importance of building the relationship with plants. And like I said, I spoke about that in other classes, breaking down little small ribbons, but I want to speak about the importance of building a relationship with it, correct? Now, just a moment ago, I spoke about cannabis. And this is going to be one of the first anti-plants that I speak about. I spoke about cannabis a little bit before, and I was pretty much speaking about how cultivating it is. And it's a lot of, controversy around this plant. And it's amazing that it is so much controversy around this plant because it's a powerful plant for many different reasons, many different ancient and cultural reasons. They term it marijuana, but marijuana is a negative or disrespectful term to call it just by the way of speaking about cannabis. If you go towards places down south as far as Mexico, as far as different places where they practice Hinduism, it's negative or have a negative term or disrespectful to call it marijuana, because marijuana got coined probably around the 1930s to 1970s, or excuse me, that's wrong, 1930s to 1950s, 60s. Around this time, you found young women of different races and cultures going to bars at night, these jazz bars. They were hanging around Hispanic, Latino, and black men, and this is how the segregation. This is one of the fights of the segregation, and where they figured that it was a humanitarianism veil going on. So when you found it in ads, when you found it spoken about on commercials and different things like that, seen it in magazines, it was called marijuana, spelled with an H. And they were speaking about this spicer that Mexicans would smoke, and if your daughter get on it, she's going to come home pregnant or come home with a black man or a Latino man. So keep your daughters and your sons away from marijuana. That's the actual quote for quote commercial that I've seen. That's where the term marijuana comes from. And I didn't want to get too deep into it, but that's the term of marijuana, and that's why we're going to term it cannabis and to move towards the term of cannabis. But it's always been used. They have hieroglyphics of cannabis over in Kemet in ancient Kemet, as far as the Bible goes, they speak about the mystical herb in Revelations. They speak about it in Matthew. They speak about it in Kings. They speak about it in Exodus. I believe in Exodus they speak about herbs in general. They speak about that every individual should eat of every herb of the earth. That I believe, not exactly word for word, but I believe that's exactly what they were getting at, that we should induce or infuse ourselves with herbiology in general. So the herb or the tree is very important. In Hindu, they have a drink called bang or bang, spelled with an H. This is a cannabinoid drink that they have, and they only got issued or given out from a shaman or a guru. And nowadays, they are abusing the bang over in different places where they practice Hinduism, of course, like everything. But they always have spoken about this drink or this nectar, this tonic or elixir that they had for over 5,000 years. So if they were using the bong, then we know that the cannabinoid plant or the cannabis plant was always a benefit, at least for the last 5,000 years. Also, in places where you find the Taoist. The Taoist was using it as an incense. They believe that it had a tripene in this plant that makes people less selfish. And when you get to smoking it and when you get to drinking it, you can see that you're more of a humanitarian, right? You're more of a cosmopolite. And I explained about this in the beginning classes, that they were fighting against different plants that was making people cosmopolites, people who wanted to get closer to integration and different things like that, and that they wanted to infuse each other, that we all part of the same ecological family, correct? You also find it in Jamaica, correct? The Rastafarian. And when you really speak to a Rastafarian, which I have a couple of them in my tribe, in my village, when you really speak to these Rastafarian gurus or priests, they don't take using the plant or the substance lightly, correct? They don't want to use it for a psychoactive experience. They want to use it for a transcendental meditative purpose. Now, it just happens that Rastafarians pray very heavily. They're some of the most Christianized people who pray more times a day than any other Christians out there. They believe in Jah, they believe in God, but it is a Christian, more Catholic type of religion, correct? But the Rastafarians believe that, or I have heard Rastafarians say that the more you smoke the plant, is the closer you get to God as far as the psychoactive substances being towards hallucinogenic properties as far as those plants, correct? So we talk about, or we find the Scythians. The Scythians in time is also found as different Taoists and different things like this. The Scythians was using the plant as, they were taking the seeds of the plant, crushing it up and giving it to their infants, and this would help the weight gaining of young infants, this would help the appetite of young infants, this would also help the cognitive performances. We have medical documents knowing that this helps acne, knowing that it helps pain and inflammation, and used as lotions, used as salves, as far as hair growth, as far as eye health, as far as different meditation purposes, as far as the metaphysicals go, and many different other medicinal purposes that we see cannabis being used here in every day. Now, also, it's good to remember that cannabis is also found in the astrology type of mannerisms. They believe that this is one of the many plants, and I will speak about this more heavily in a moment, but this is the many plants. Once you start understanding the botanical, once you start growing the botanical and experimenting with the botanical, you understand that it is very sensitive to grow. They believe that it's mountains, and there is guaranteed to be mountains, Hindu mountains, where the plant is found grown naturally. From these mountains, it's the Hindu mountains. This is where the Hindu Kush comes from, and this is where the Hindu Kush is one of the more popular names that you have probably ever heard of any of the Kushes. This is the spiritual plant that they are speaking about, not more of the procreated marijuana that we are seeing today that have many different chemicals, etc. on it. Now, I also spoke about the fig tree for a small moment before. When I spoke about it before, I spoke about curses and different energies of magic being found inside the Bible, correct? I spoke about Jesus, the story of Jesus. Don't hold me on this the scripture, which number it is, or which text it is, but it was Jesus found in the Bible, and he had cursed the fig tree because it was a dormant time, it was a stagnant time. The fig tree didn't produce any fruit, and he cursed the fig tree, and the fig tree died. This was only one remnant of the fig tree in its mystical powers. The fig tree is also found in Islamic cultures, but when it's found in Islamic cultures, it's found in the forbidden section of trees. They match it up with the olive tree, and this is one of the many different arguments Islamic traditions had with Christianity traditions, because Christians believe that the olive tree is a sanctified and pure tree. Islamic older Islamic traditions believe that it is a forbidden tree and that you should not eat from it, and that apples are a younger dated plant, and that the fig tree is more older and around the time of if the sacred Adam and Eve Genesis story was true, that it had to be talking about the fig tree. So this is the residuals, or excuse me, this is the remnants of finding the fig tree all in the religious texts and different things like that. Buddha was found meditating during a late night, they believe. He was found meditating under, by, or around a fig tree. I forget the exact scripture or text that it was, but it was definitely under, around, or by a fig tree. So this was found in all texts: Buddhism, Islam, and Christianity. The fig tree is the symbol of life. It's the symbol of sacred knowledge. It's the signal of that there is a representation of a different energy source that's out there, and that's the deities, that's the Loas, that's the Bandi, that's the good God, correct? Now, once we get to the different trees of life, remember I said that we're going to speak about trees very often. And once again, I was in a couple other classes, and I spoke about not letting me forget about the eight theory. This is the class where the eight theory will be of importance to a certain degree. So please don't let me forget about the eight theory. But we get to the different trees that we find, the different roots that we find. We get to the mandrake tree. I'll start with the mandrake tree, or the mandrake root, excuse me. The mandrake root is found in the Bibles as well. We find Rachel giving birth to Jacob. They believe that she had a mandrake root in her hand while she gave birth in the Genesis story of that. The mandrake tree is very mystical. You find many different stories about it if you look it up. They believe that it is the symbolization of man's life here on earth. It's also similarities of the KhAn, the conqueror root with this root, but it has many different undertone mystics of it. They believe that if concocted the right way, this is a poisonous root, so to have very, very disclaimer on this to use the different benefits of it. They believe that the shape of it here, knowing and having a relationship, being a relationship with these plants is important. Remember, so the shape of it here is very important. If it's shaped like a woman, they believe that it will help her with fertility, it would help her with labor, it would help her with different bearing of the child in general, bringing life of the child in general. Now, they also say if it's shaped like a child, you should put it under the pillow of the child or the small infant, and this would help growth. This would help a longevity of life. This will help protection of the child, correct? And this is the gender-specific ideology or science of the mandrake root. Now, also, it was so important in history that they started to create fakes. It's called the brawny root. You find it as the brawny root. They would say it has the same exact similarities, but this is a fake root that they have cultivated, man has cultivated, and this is a so-called plagiarized system of people trying to use the magic for their own. So if you ever run into the brawny root, remember that the brawny root is a fake to the mandrake root. Now this is found in astrology as well. You get Aphrodite in Greek mythology. Aphrodite also in the aphrodisiac. This is where the aphrodisiacs come from. This goddess, the goddess of sexual and erotic interactions, etc. You can find her as. But this is also lined up with her as well. Now the mandrake root would be the second one, but I see you guys are very smart at taking down. I'm going to skip over that for a little bit later. Next, I want to speak about, this is not one of the ones, but you get a masha and a machine. And this is one of the more topics of trees, correct? These are trees that they speak about in different Amazonian regions. The masha and machine was two brother and sister trees. They believed that these was our ancient ancestors of the plant life. That these ancestors had all the answers for the humans. They had all the relatives all in connectedness. So they were in relationship or had a connection with you, And they had a connection with the squirrel, they had a connection with the fox and the bird as well, and they were the grandmother of all living beings that was here and that was radiant. When you see Pocahontas, and you see the tree alive and the tree talking as the grandmother, this was a representation of that. Knowing that trees was very important. When you get down to the Amazonian region around Costa Rica and different regions like that, they talk about the man or the land of the big trees, the magic or the spook of the big trees. This was what they were speaking about, that these plants, these derivatives had a message. They had a direct message from the higher deities or power source for all living being or children that was alive here. You find these trees represented in Iranian mythology. You find these trees in Indian and Native American mythology. I believe it's called Avestinian mythology. You find these big trees or magic of big trees, or you find Masha or machine, or you find different representations like Pocahontas that I spoke about. Now, we also want to speak about Amisha Spinta, which is the goddess of the trees, the goddess of the tree of life. This was a guardian of botanicals. Amisha Spinta Formida. This was a protection of all plants. They speak about this in Hinduism. They speak about this in Iranian mythology as well. Now, you will see or hear a word once you dive deep into this. You will hear they call it a substance called homa or phoma. One of the more modern terms is Greek, and you find it in the Greek lexicon, and they call it soma. They say this is the big body of the man. As they was talking about the big body of the trees, they were speaking about this is the big body of the man, soma, S-O-M-A. This was a chemical substance that we were speaking about that humans possess that can be activated by plant material or photochemical substances, which is plant compounds. What I believe, and many other students of the Young Society, when I speak about Terrence McKenna, the Young Society of LA, California, they believe, and I believe, that the substance they speak about when they speak about soma is DMT, ditryptamine, correct? And we will speak about this a little bit more in a minute, but I want to go to some plants that I'm sure that you are familiar with. Once again, don't let me forget about the 8 theory, and don't let me forget about Christmas. I'm trying to speed through it for many different reasons, because I don't want to linger for too long. But don't let me get about the 8 theory, and don't let me get about the Christmas remnants of this. But the next one I will speak about is frankincense. We all know this, frankincense and myrrh. This is very popular. This is very ancient, correct? This is a solar herb. This is one of them that's connected with the astrology as well. The ancient shamans, the ancient gurus understood how important it was to keep our bodies intact, to understand that if we align ourselves with astrology, the stars, the moon, the sun, that we would have these ancient powers. But it wasn't just this lining ourselves up with the sun. The plants that we are dealing with had elements to them as well. Fire elements, earth elements, water elements. And it has astronomy elements as well. This is a solar herb, a sun herb, just like the sun opener I spoke about as well. It's a sun herb. This herb has always been burnt as incense, right? It can keep bad spirits away. It's good for cleaning. It's good for banishing. You find it in paganism. You find it in many different mythical practices. They believe frankincense was burnt before and after battle, and this was the calling of good spirits to keep you protected during times of war, panic, trauma, oppression, or going through depression. They believe that the frankincense plant in general had what we call anthelmintic acid, which is also found in blueberries. And this property or photochemical of plants has the benefit of curing or treating or assisting depression in humans. So as you cure yourself or assist yourself with this depression, you have more focus, you will have more drive to continue the fight, continue the oppression, or whatever battle you was going through at the moment. And frankincense is pretty much popular, and it's very easy to research. It's very easy to self-conduct and self-experiment with. So we need to understand that frankincense was also used in Cleopatra as well, correct? Over in Egypt. And the reason why I say it's so easy to use is because they used it for everything over there. Over in Kemet, the eyeliner that you see, that was frankincense and different incense mixed together and used. They used it for cleaning. Cleopatra used it in her love potions or love chamber spells. They believed that Cleopatra held tantra sex rituals where about 16 people to 30 people would be inside these rituals, and they would have these orgies of tantric sex times, and frankincense was always the first or last to be burnt during those rituals, during those tantric sexual practices. So it's also found in different mythologies as far as Greek. They believe that one of the Greek gods who was I forget his name exactly off the top of my head, but in relations, whoever they believe Zeus's brother is, had frankincense growing in his backyard for protection of any enemies who would try to infiltrate him from any blind spots. The being in the backyard was just a representation of being a weak spot for him. So frankincense is found all in history. It's found in different commercial practices and deep practices and everything. And it's an auntie plant. It's very strong, but you can access it very easy. It's very popular. You can find it at the African festival. You can find it downstairs. You can find it anywhere that these herbs or incense is sold. So it's very popular, but it's very strong as well, correct? Now, I'm going to speak about belladonna next. This belladonna is also found as nightshade. Now, I see you laughing here. Nightshade is very popular as well. It's a lot of different stories about it. It's a lot of different things about it, correct? They believe any oracle, the oracle in the Matrix, any oracles that you know as far as clairvoyances, divination, fortune telling, they were using nightshade. Disclaimer, this is a poisonous plant. This is a plant that could kill you if not dosaged the right way. It's so powerful